Megan Okonsky is a ghostwriter and novelist based in Austin, Texas. She has worked with C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, and media personalities to produce best-selling business books and memoirs. She also ghostwrites DMs on dating sites, dropping pickup lines and arranging coffee dates for her clients. Welcome to Notes from a Ghost, a podcast about stories and the people who tell them. My name is Charlie, and I'm a ghostwriter. I love a good story. I hope you enjoy this one. Megan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm so excited for this episode. I can't wait to talk about dating, ghostwriting, that and to share a little bit of my story, because my first ghostwriting job was something very similar. But first things first, is there such a thing as a good pickup line? And if so, I want to hear one.
Yes and no. My pickup line to my partner was literally, "Is that your dog?" And it was. So I think a good pickup line is anything that shows interest. I think something a little cheesy only works if there's nothing else to use. The person will respond if they want to respond. So I don't know if that helps, but the best pickup line is tailored to the person that's, who you're trying to pick up.
Yeah, right. And I guess the situation, right? I mean, I feel like where stuff like that can go wrong is when people think there's some line they can memorize or whatever. And
yeah, if you want to know something about a person, that's great. Sometimes I'll ask, is there something that people would be surprised to learn about you? It's not, the cheesiest pickup line, but it does get people talking. My sister's boyfriend's pickup line to her was, "We're going to get married one day," so, which is not the best advice. I don't recommend that for everyone, but it does work sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, clearly. And did they? Are they married? Wow.
They're not married yet, but we are all patiently waiting for.
Oh, amazing!
That to happen.
It's coming.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I guess it's kind of like, I always call the sort of discovery call questions that I ask, and you and I were talking about this before we got on here. I call them like first date questions, because really you are in that space in a ghostwriting project when you're just starting, where there's kind of no sense of what are we, where are we going. It's more about like, who are you and what is there to talk about?
Yes. Yeah. I know Marcia had talked about curiosity in a previous episode of this podcast. And yeah, that curiosity and just kind of figuring out where you are in the moment and figuring out who this other person is and where you can connect is so important. And this works in ghostwriting books, memoirs, and ghostwriting for clients who are trying to get a date. There's always this kind of subject or topic where people's eyes light up and they really want to talk about something, whether it's their core message that they want to share with their readers, or it's a trip they took to New Zealand, or it's like the Philadelphia Phillies. Finding that eye-opening subject and that eye-opening topic is something that just creates that instant connection, and I think really gets the conversation going, whether you're on a date or in that discovery call.
I'm always surprised by how often that happens in like business books, because I've done like two kinds of books. I've done books that are trauma intense. Usually that's like the theme of the book, memoirs. But I've also done total opposite end marketing guidebooks and things like that. And I'm always surprised how often in the marketing books, which in theory aren't that personal, something will come up where it's like, I've never told anyone this, but, or, my family doesn't even know this about me. Or it's crazy how that works. And it is that eyes lighting up, or kind of the therapy phenomenon of like in minute 55 of an hour-long conversation. Let's talk about what I really want to talk about.
Yeah, and it takes, you can't always get there immediately. I use that Philadelphia Phillies example because I was actually at a wedding recently, and there was the groom's family. I didn't know too many people at the wedding. I didn't really know what to talk about. And everyone was about to leave and go home. The wedding was over. The after hours were over. And then I mentioned something about the Phillies to, I think, the groom's dad. And we were there for an hour, chatting, about the Phillies and stuff. And it does happen sometimes in that last minute, and it takes a while to get there. But once you do, that's kind of where that golden conversation comes from. And the really authentic conversation too, because it's not a person just thinking about what they want to answer. It's something that's been inside of them that they want to share, and they're so excited to share.
And I think when the other place where that really seems to come across is as an important takeaway is like sales and
yes,
because again, like dating, I think where I think the one thing that's almost guaranteed to mess you up is when you're just sort of like obsessed with some outcome. Whether you're trying to find someone who's, it's like this, I need to know what we are right away, or like this, I'm trying to like go home with this person or whatever. Like if that agenda is like overshadowing the potential for an interesting conversation. And I think it's the same with people trying to, I don't know, like the projects I close, it's because we just start talking about something random and we hit it off. And then they're like, do you want to write my book?
Yeah. In the dating kind of world, there's this idea, the NATO mindset, not attached to outcome. And it is that, if you're just enjoying the moment, if you're just being mindful, if you're just, enjoying the fact that you're in front of a new person and you're having a nice drink at a nice bar, you're going to have so much more fun dating than if you're sitting there saying, okay, is this a green flag? Is this a red flag? Is this a yellow flag? Is this a green flag? But maybe I'm mistaking it as a red flag because of my past relationship. If you're just mindful and in the moment and having those conversations, yeah, you're going to have a much more positive experience dating. And I've seen a lot of people get really burnt out by dating and burnt out by, trying to put their best foot forward and be this, ideal version of themselves. And, it gets exhausting so quickly. And it's just, if you're just enjoying the moment, you're less likely to get burnt out.
And so just to talk about the writing side of that, because there is a reason we're talking about dating. So I'll just quickly summarize, because what I was so astonished by when I read your article on the Association of Ghostwriters, which I'll link to, and I heard a little bit about what you do. So my first ghostwriting job was for a startup that was helping people rewrite their OkCupid profiles.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a big interview component to that, where I would sit down with a person and really try. And it always amazed me how different the person in the interview was from the person they were trying to portray in the profile. And I loved it. I kind of wish I was still doing it, and that it was a startup, unfortunately, that folded. And but it was great, and I learned a lot. But I was astonished, and I had so many questions when I learned that you actually your ghostwriting in the dating space includes DMing people. So tell me a little bit about how you got into that and what that looks like. Like,
yeah, the first time I actually did this for a client, he found me on Upwork. I've been a copywriter, ghostwriter for over 9 years, and a lot of the ways I've gotten jobs are through Upwork. My first copywriting job I literally found through Craigslist, which I don't recommend. It's not, it's not what it used to be. So on Upwork, this guy approached me, and he had asked, if I wanted to manage 4 of his dating accounts, which is quite a lot. I think it was like Tinder, Hinge, Coffee Meets Bagel, and Bumble, I think. And we did a trial run. I was actually living in Australia at the time. He was in San Diego. So ultimately, the timing was just a little bit off. But I've always been, aware of that space. I've been aware that this is a possibility. And so, throughout my career, I've just kind of kept myself in the know of opportunities to write about topics that I'm interested in, for, entrepreneurs and for coaches, in industries that I'm interested in. So I'd actually on LinkedIn, I had followed a ton of dating coaches. And this is part of a story that I've actually made up for myself because I don't specifically remember following my boss, the woman I'm working for, who runs a little nudge. I don't remember following her on LinkedIn. But I know I follow a lot of dating coaches and that I wanted to kind of work in this space. And that's how I, found out about this position specifically. So yeah, my whole career has been kind of grown from these kind of unconventional ways of just kind of being around and saying, well, I've been a writer for 9 years. I'm good at what I do. I'm, love to tell stories. I'm here to help you kind of take what your message is and share it with people. And, sometimes it's in the form of a business book and sometimes it's in the form of, a pickup line. So
I've noticed that because you've also said that like the questions don't stop when people find out that you do this. And I'd love to know what people ask you. I found that because I've very deliberately kept that old job on my resume as ghostwriter and dating coach. And I get more questions about that, like to this day, even though it was a decade ago. Yeah, what do people want to know?
A lot of people want to know, one, just how the process works. They want to know about, couples that I've set up in the past and how, I think dating apps for it, surprisingly, it's kind of an isolating experience. We're all, unless you're having your friend check your profile for you or you're, talking openly with all of your friends about your profile. For some people, it's a very private thing. I don't think it should be because I think you should have your friends look over your profile. There are many profiles that I'm like, how are you putting this out into the world? Why are you? And it's not even like inappropriate stuff. It's just very negative stuff where it's like, how did even if, if you're in your 50s, if you have kids, like have your kids look at your profiles so that, what you're presenting is, wholesome and your best self and all these things. So that I get questions about just kind of the process, how it works, success rates. And then a lot of it is, can you look at my dating profile, which I'm always happy to do, because, I'm opinionated about these things, but also because I think having that second look is important. You don't always think, this is the first impression I'm going to give people about myself. It's the same, in ghostwriting, we talked about this, that, the people that the voice that a person thinks they are sharing is not always the voice that they're talking to us with. People don't always see themselves how other people see them. So I think having that second look is so important to, just make sure your friends and the people that love you and know you really well think your profile is reflecting the best parts about you.
That makes a lot of sense. And oh man, yeah. And it goes to that old thing too, of like when people say, tell me about yourself, like that's when the nonsense begins, because actually they've been telling you about themselves. He was like an English professor. He said, like, watch out for that question because, the way someone dresses, what picture they thought was a good idea to put on, that's going to tell you something. So I remember we had like some data from OK, and it's probably, I know they are like scientists about data over there, and it's probably super outdated at this point, what I saw. But because I remember we evaluated pictures and we had very kind of evidence-based feedback. And the one thing that I remember that blew my mind is that for guys, the shirtless mirror selfie does better than the LinkedIn profile picture in a suit where it's like a yearbook photo. And I don't know if that's true, but it was at the time, and I was astonished. And now they both do poorly, to be clear. Like,
sure, yeah,
but marginally you're better off. And I think the reason was you didn't understand the assignment if you've got the professional headshot.
Yeah.
Does that ring true? Have you encountered that?
I would say the shirtless mirror selfie is not, it's not successful when I'm swiping on it. But I will say the best photo that you can take is just a photo of you in your natural environment. Your natural environment is not with a backdrop at JCPenney, like in a suit. Unless you're showing up to the date in a suit, and that's fine, and then take your photo in a suit. But it's just so much better if you're at a restaurant, if you're at happy hour, if you're at the park with your friend doing whatever, and you just say, okay, here, take a picture of me in front of this margarita or in front of this, me doing karaoke. Because that's the person that people are going to be seeing. How often is your date really going to see you in a suit? And how often are they going to see you in front of the mirror taking a shirtless photo? Who knows?
Yeah, there might be deeper issues if that's like Patrick Bateman meets Jersey Shore or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not how you're going to be showing up to, grab a coffee in the morning. So it's, it also just looks cheesy with, compared to all of the other profiles that you see. When you see the shirtless selfie, it's like, okay, well, I've seen better photos. I know you can do better,
And anything else, like, just for people listening, something they could do like today to just sort of improve their profile. I feel like getting from like to pretty good is actually a lot easier than people think. And you don't need, I don't know that there is such a thing as like a great profile. It just pretty good is usually enough.
I think there are two things that I think are important. One is just being positive. I am shocked at how much people how often people lead with negativity. And it's kind of going back to what I had said before, is that I think when that happens, a person is alone in their room and they're just frustrated with dating. They've gone on these dating apps to say, okay, this is what people are doing now. I'm going to have to do it, but I'm not having a good time. And they just lead with this negativity without thinking that, then the other person's going to see it and they're going to think, oh, this person, all they've done so far is complain. Like the person swiping on you is a complete stranger. They know nothing about you. And the first thing you're going to do is say a terrible thing about dating apps or the situation you're in or whatever. It's so frustrating and also just makes the overall dating app experience not as fun. So I think just like leading with positivity, you're looking for someone that's going to do X, Y, and Z with you in the future. Like, why not write about that and what you're already doing and what you want a person to do? So I think that's one thing. And then another, I like writing in specifics. There's like a podcast I like, the shit that no one tells you about writing. Sorry if I can't curse on here.
Yeah. But yeah, you can totally. Yeah.
Okay. It's the name of the podcast. But they talk about writing, just in general. And it's, people think in specifics. They don't think in generalities. So, I have a friend, and I've posted about this before. She has a very specific type of pizza and a very specific type of beer that she has on her profile. And and it's not specific enough that people in Austin don't know what this pizza place is. It's Via 313. But it's enough where people can say, oh, I like that pizza. I'm going to reach out. Here's a connection point. Not everyone's going to see this. We've already got something in common. So I think just having that common, if it's a silly TV show or if it's a comedian you like, again, not so niche that like only one person is going to know what it is. But I remember when I was dating, I had very briefly on my profile, it was, I'm just here because Kevin Smith is already married. I had just seen Clerks and I was a very big fan of it. And then it's great because automatically you're talking about a movie that you like, or you're talking about a director you like, and you can find that, at the time I really liked the movie Clerks. So that was my eyes light up moment. So I was able to, have that fun spirited conversation. So yes, being specific, being positive, and just embracing who you are and what you like to do, how you want another person to fit into your life.
That's really good. What you're saying though about specifics, and I'm not going to say what I think about this, but anyone who knows me, I think would probably know what I think about this. But when I was single and I was home on the Cape, like outside of Boston, a lot of profiles, and I could never understand this. These are like women would have TB12, Tom Brady, number 12 in their profile, kind of like how people have Bible verses or whatever.
Yeah.
Like they would like the, and I don't know. I mean, my wife is Swiss. My kind of one big ick is like American women who need you to know that they're football fans or whatever, because like
yeah.
I'm not and
Sure.
but anyway, yeah, that one always kind of baffled me. I'm like, who is that for? Like,
and I will say it is better than like TB12 is better than I like sports. Because then it's like, okay, like I'm not, because then the people who do, and I've seen it on men's profiles too about Tom Brady has a hold on people in Boston.
In New England.
Yeah, it's wild. And it's the point where this would happen, because I've worked with people in Boston before, and it's like he wasn't even on the Patriots anymore, but they're like, I've got to follow him. And I don't understand, but also the person who is that excited about it is probably not for me, because I'm not a big football fan anyway, and that's fine. And I can, find someone who is more excited about, name other celebrity here,
Well, I mean, my one that I saw, I was actually surprised at the frequency that this one came up, but it was like, it speaks to me. There's this one Liz Phair song that was kind of, there's like two different lines from it that I saw in profiles like again and again. I was like, oh,
that I don't like.
Speaking my language.
Because it's not, I think some people
it was negative. It was very negative.
Yeah. And I think people use their dating profile, they think of it as like a MySpace profile, and they put song lyrics, or they think of it as like an instant AOL Instant Messenger. Because I will see, and it's primarily men, will put like inspirational like thoughts on their, and it's not like as a here's my philosophy, it's like here's my message to the world. And it's like you're not this is not your stage, this is you meeting someone. Like, think about how you would describe yourself to people at a bar, rather than saying like, today is the present, or today is a gift, that's why we call it the present. It tells me a little bit about you, but like, what can a person say to that other than nice message? It is a pet peeve, because I'm like, if you want to share that message, write a book. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. No, it's interesting. And there's something, it's so funny because that's so MySpace to like share.
Yes.
Lyrics, but also like, yeah, you're kind of, there's not a lot of room there for back and forth, which, speaking of, so like what makes for a good DM, and kind of what are common mistakes or ways people can up their game?
The way that I approach writing for other people on dating apps, it's pretty similar to how I approach writing for business books, writing for memoirs. It's just a very condensed version, because with ghostwriting books and ghostwriting memoirs, I'm thinking about the larger story. I'm thinking about where we're going to take this narrative over the course of 200, 300 pages. But the initial questions that I ask anyone are kind of similar, because it's asking the initial question and then just being curious throughout their answer. I think in dating, and when we're writing for clients like books, I think assumptions really hold us back. So a person can make a statement about, what they want in a partner. They can make a statement about how they see themselves in business, or a statement about a lesson they've learned throughout their life. And we can assume we know where it's coming from, but that's not always the case. We are just putting, our assumption on where that person's meaning is coming from. And so, being curious, and I think not assuming anything, always ensures that like we get the message right the first time we're writing for them. I find myself when writing like business books and memoirs, like I will kind of write based on, a statement that they've said, and then it's like, okay, I want to make sure that all of the other statements, everything else that follows that, is still true to their mindset and still true to where they're seeing the world, how they're seeing the world. And so, yeah, just having that curiosity and even just having the curiosity on the dating apps when, if I'm writing for someone and I'm trying to get to know the other person, just being curious about them, asking them questions, seeing where they're coming from to see if it's a better match for the client. So yeah, just curiosity is so big.
And it goes back to, I think Marcia brought this up, and I've heard other ghosts talk about this, that why is like the most important. I call it like toddler mode, where you ask why, and then why, but why, and it's amazing where that can lead.
It really forces people to think about what they've just said. And I see that because there's a dating coach named Damona Hoffman, and she wrote a book called F the Fairy Tale. And that's the conversation that she has with, if she has to have an uncomfortable conversation with a client about, their dating criteria, or, just something that's an uncomfortable conversation, it's just asking like why 5 times. And this doesn't always apply to, ghostwriting books, because, we're not trying to get our clients uncomfortable. But by the time you're asking someone why the 5th time, they really it takes people a minute to think, why am I saying this? Why am I coming at this from this perspective? But those 4 whys beforehand, like those answers completely inform us along the way. And are, a lot of the times it's not what we assumed, about why a person said something. So why is so important.
Yeah, it's huge. Even I think about a lot of things in my life right now hinge on they started on those kind of why conversations with people whose advice I put a lot of stock in. There was one kind of DM, like very specific DM question I wanted to ask, and I could be, again, it's been a long time since I've been on these apps, and I know they're always changing. Bumble, that's the one where women have to message first. Is that still the case?
They have an option on the app where you can ask a question, like just one question, and men who match with you, provided this is a straight pairing,
Sure.
they can answer that question. So that is an option, but it's only one question. They did a big rebrand recently, and it was just to show that they had this one question. It was a very bizarre rebrand.
I remember that. It got a lot of flack. This was like a couple months ago.
Yes. Yes. It was I kind of excited to see if they were going to have more opportunities for men to reach out first, but that is just not what happened. And, oh well.
So I guess, and again, we're talking in such generalities in like kind of a very, it's weird too how I find people do kind of treat very traditional gender roles as this like sort of comfort and familiarity in dating. And I think some of people's like really odd assumptions about expectations stem from those. And like for a woman who is coming from a thinking like, well, he has to make the move, or what would you suggest? Because I remember when I was on Bumble getting a lot of like, hey, and it's like, you hate it when guys, like some of the negativity people would put in their profile is like, you better not just say, hey. And so why would you do that? But I can understand at the same time the pressure that's kind of not normalized of like you're the one who has to start the conversation. What's a productive way to like approach that?
I think in my personal opinion, I think that kind of those gender roles are very silly. So it's tough, where I think that if you want to meet someone, you can ask them to meet you. So, if you want to be courted, which is completely fine, I think that's something you still have to, at some point, communicate in 2024. There's so many issues and questions of who asks who out, who pays on the first date, who, does the man pick up the woman in his car? Does he do all of these things that were completely normal? I think it's best to just not make assumptions about how the other person is going to approach dating. Because I've seen a lot of men who have horror stories where they're like, oh, I tried to pick up the bill and she was mad at me because I'm not a feminine. And it's, whether those situations are true or not, it does exist where a person could be hesitant to make that move because of whatever reason. So I like to think that what's more important, rather than whether which person followed which rules, it's, can you communicate the rules that you're expecting and what you would like in a relationship, and see how they respond to that? Because if they respond poorly, that tells you quite a lot of information.
Now you know.
Yeah. If they respond with, oh, I was hesitant to ask you out because I wanted to give you the first move. We're on Bumble. That's the whole thing on Bumble. Now that I know you want to be courted, here's the plan, X, Y, and Z. I think that says a lot more than just a guy that's, isn't given, or a person that isn't given that opportunity to, respond to feedback, requests, etc. And that it is very exhausting, and assuming is so easy. But, you got to work a little bit in dating, unfortunately. But it's worth it in the end.
And I mean, based on your experience, would you think it's fair to say, like, this is, and kind of like listening for ghostwriters, that it's one of those things where people seem to think it's like set in stone and it's like a fixed thing about who you are. But, dating is a skill that can be developed and worked on and all the rest.
Yeah. It is a skill like that you have to practice. Like the dating apps are a tool in your toolbox that you can use to meet new people and find a person that, is the one for you, or, the one for now, whatever. It's a tool that you have to learn how to use. It's the same with meeting a new person at the bar, or meeting a new person at the climbing gym, meeting a new person through friends. It takes practice, and it takes, you might not do so well, or you might get rejected along the way, or you might miscommunicate with someone, and that's okay. No one has to be perfect at all of these things or be able to do it successfully. It's very much a skill to be learned. I think with ghostwriting as well, because it is, practicing, okay, they've said this, I need to step back and not assume that they said this because of this. Let me ask some questions. And I think asking good questions is also a skill to be learned. We don't think about it. No one teaches you how to interview in school. So it takes practice, and it takes time to kind of have that good conversation and lead the conversation to, wherever you want it to lead.
There's a friend of mine who's a journalist and a TV reviewer, and he was saying that, and he's like a total introvert, and that's why he's a writer. But he's like, he's like, how do people run out of things to say? Because what I do is I just start asking people questions. He's like, I'd love getting sat next to a random person at a wedding. have a new friend by the end of the evening, or at least I'll have learned a bunch of things about some random cousin or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask about there. We have so much stimulation in this world and we have so much going on. Yeah, how do you run out of things to say? When I used to work in retail a long time ago, I had to practice active listening where it was, someone would tell me something about their day and I find that little detail about what they just said and then ask them to extrapolate on that. And then, and it's a skill and I had to practice it when I was in retail. Not everyone gets that opportunity to practice it. And yeah, it's definitely something that you learn how to do and you learn how to do that in a less awkward manner. And it takes time.
Brilliant. I want to shift gears to the writing in a second, but because and you have some exciting news in that department. But I had kind of another just general dating question. I'm going to totally blank. I think this is from that Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
I just read that. Yep.
Great. It's one of those books that totally lived up to the hype. At least for me, I really enjoyed it. But he had this article, I think it was an article of his, where it was like toxic behaviors people think are healthy and healthy things that people think are toxic. And I'm wondering what those are for you, or what's your hot take there? Because I think when I look at like dating advice and online, I feel like so much of it is addressing questions of what's okay, red flags, etc. And I think those can vary so much.
Yeah, I think the most, my hottest take is that having those rules and being such a stickler to certain rules ends up holding you back so much because you're meeting a stranger. You don't know the entirety of their life experience, what they just heard from a best friend, the, parent that has given them a certain upbringing, the, all of these different ways that make us who we are and inform our opinions and inform how we approach things like dating, which is changed so much in the past 10, 50, 100 years. I think expecting people to fit a certain set of rules and abide by them, and that's how you get to where you want. I think it will just hold you back. And it's, if someone kind of breaks one of those rules, like I always give people the benefit of the doubt, because one picture, unless it's super offensive and egregious, or one prompt that they didn't fill out, or one thing they may have said you might turn someone off. Or if they are texting before a date, which some dating coaches say that's a no, and there's good reasons for that. But I've talked to people where it's like where they've texted before a date and we're texting too much, and it's like you can just ask them, hey, let's hold off. Let's get to know each other in person. We've scheduled a date. Let's get to know each other on the date, rather than getting upset that they are not following a rule that you know about and that you've decided to follow, but they have absolutely no knowledge of this rule or how important it is to you. And it's, again, going back to like communicating, hey, I'd rather not text before the date. I'd rather just see you in person. If the person responds to that by saying, oh, you're so rude, or like whatever, or they respond in a negative way, that tells you quite a bit. But they could also say, great idea. I don't like to be tied to my phone either. See you on Saturday. Great. Amazing. You just saved that date and saved yourself a lot of anger and frustration and anxiety.
Yeah, that's great. And I think there's like so many situations, and in writing and in work, where like communication is the answer. And weirdly, I think that, and this maybe goes to something that is really toxic that people think is healthy. I would argue that for our generation and younger, the tendency towards conflict avoidance and prioritizing the most offended person in the room actually creates more conflict and more hurt feelings, because it's amazing sometimes what can be on the other side of resolving a misunderstanding.
I think it takes time to get to that place, and that's like having Instagram, having Amazon, having all of this technology where everything is at our fingertips, everything is easily accessible, including messages that we want to hear about X, Y, and Z subject. We can find, our algorithms are designed to kind of confirm our biases. We don't see things that challenge what we want, our perspective, unless we're actively seeking that out. So we're losing the ability to have everyone kind of share their perspective, and we have to actively challenge our thinking and see where everyone's perspective is, and know that we're going to disagree, and this person's life experience is vastly different than mine. They've seen things that I have not experienced for whatever reason. It takes time to put yourself in another person's shoes and get to that point where they're comfortable to share those experiences, and that they're sharing those experiences and you're listening to those experiences. And it's hard to do when everything else is so automated and so easy, and easy, it quickly confirms what we think we already know. It's a skill.
Yes. And the one that came up the other day when I was talking to my wife about this, her kind of big ick around communication is when couples are like, oh, we never fight. It's like, ooh, that,
conflict is going to happen.
Yeah.
You're not going to agree on everything. You're not going to see everything the same way because you're two different people. So I think you can never fight in a way that you're shouting at each other and you're breaking things. And, it's not that kind of fight, but you may not have you may still disagree. And then you just have the tools and you have the patience and you have you've done the work to, when you get to a certain point, you're like, okay, we need to go for a walk. We need to, hold each other's hands. I'm not a conflict resolution therapist. So, I know it works for me in my relationship, but I think you're going to have disagreements. That's just life. You're going to spend, hopefully 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years with a person. You're not going to agree on everything. You're going to have fights about some things, but it's, how quickly do you sit down, resolve, and work on finding a solution together, rather than fighting each other, you're fighting the problem,
Yeah, that, forget where I read that, but that was my favorite little conflict resolution tidbit is, it's not you versus me, it's you and me versus the problem.
It's a game changer. And I wish everyone knew that.
It's really good. I like that a lot. I mean, even just, and I think that's where ghostwriters are at a weird advantage in just human relationships in general. Going just fully setting aside your own beliefs, standards, values, etc., not to be a relativistic and anything goes, but to genuinely consider someone else's point of view, and to literally the next thing that comes out of your mouth is going to be referenced or is going to kind of the barometer is where they're coming from, not what you have to say or what you think about something. And it's amazing the things people will tell you once they realize that they're not about to get judged.
Yeah, I feel like I'm so lucky to have, not stumbled into this position because I actively was I want to ghostwrite for, entrepreneurs, coaches, business leaders. I feel so lucky that I can, take on their knowledge and give them a space to share their wisdom with first me and then their readers. I feel like I work a lot with like sales coaches. I've worked with wellness coaches. I've worked with just really amazing people with amazing life stories. And to be able to hear what, their message and their experience in this, like raw, unfiltered form is like the best college course you can ever get, or the best business course you can ever get. I'm so thankful to be in this position. And this is kind of the path that I've taken, because you really do learn so much, but it does take sitting back, not putting your assumptions on things, and just letting that knowledge flow.
I love the thought of that. That would actually make a really good course, like to have students go and do like an as told to, like a short ghostwriting project. And I'm sure like there's a lot of places like nursing homes, I'm sure would be happy to have you come and do like a, there's some amazing stuff. Like, I think there's like nonprofits out there that do that collect like oral histories and there. Have you read the book Storyworthy? It's by this guy who's like a frequent winner of the Moth Story Slams. It's amazing. It made me a much better storyteller. And he talks about how one of his rules for storytelling is you can only tell, you don't tell other people's stories, but you can tell your part of their story. And I won't spoil it, but he relates, there's a nonprofit he works with who they work with like Holocaust survivors, but now their children and grandchildren to like record stories and family histories. And he gives this really incredible example of a woman who is telling her father's story, but she's not telling the story of what he went through. She's telling the story of how she experienced his memories. And I was listening to it in an audiobook, and I'm going to get really emotional if I talk about it right now. So I hope I won't. But it's really good.
Okay. That's on the list. That's,
Storyworthy. I wish I could remember the guy's name, but
I'll find it.
I wanted to save the last few minutes, and I didn't want to get into it too much because I know everyone has different kind of standards for talking about stuff that isn't out in the world yet, but you have a novel coming out.
I do.
And the title is like on a whole other level.
Yes. Yeah. So August 19th, 2025. It's called The Barefoot Followers of Sweet Potato Grace. It is a very silly story about a young woman who is at a bit of a crossroads. She is actually mourning her cat. She has written a eulogy for the cat, and she wants to use this as an opportunity because she's getting some sympathy, she's getting some grace, to come out of the closet to her friends and family in a very small, very gossipy, conservative Texas town. And she's about to do this, and her speech is interrupted by a Volkswagen van filled with barefoot strangers who decide to move into this town where nothing has happened. They love their routine. They love, everything to stay the same. And this group of barefoot people shakes up the town. They get many accusations of being a cult. They are certainly not what they seem. But our main character, her name is Pinky Swear. She befriends this group. Yeah, thank you. Named after a cat. Shocker. And she befriends this group, and it is a very silly story. It's very funny. If you like cults, it has a lot of fun cult references in it. It's very it's a good book for. I've seen a lot of people who say, "Oh, I'm sick of the thrillers. I'm sick of the dark, the heavy, emotional stuff. I want something light. I want something fun. I want to laugh." That's what this book is for. It's very funny, if I do say so myself.
Well, I mean, Dominique and I will be checking it out because we love cats and we love cults. We've
Perfect.
I I guess I can say this because it was such an unpromising lead, and I don't think I was on a call with a very deluded person who thought they wanted to write a book, and this person bore a striking resemblance to Jim Jones.
Oh.
And yeah. And I knew there, like, I have certain friends who listen to certain podcasts for whom that was like, say no more. But the resemblance, it wasn't so much, a little bit facial structure, a little bit, but more than anything, the aviator sunglasses, which remained on for our call indoors. And kind of, I don't want to say anything ageist here, but there wasn't a lot of knowledge of where to position the camera relative to one's face. So I was kind of looking up the aviator sunglasses.
Amazing.
It was wild, but it would have been, I think it would have, if it hadn't been for the cult kind of lore, I don't think I would have made that. I would have thought it was weird, but I wouldn't have gone there.
It's an extra red flag when you can pick out the cult leader that, they remind you of, which is, sometimes is fun. They are, cult leaders are very charismatic people with interesting messages to share. But yeah, in general, it's you want to avoid. So
actually, and it's funny because I was going to ask you kind of like a more, I just thought of like kind of a more general cult question, but there's one that's very relevant to what we were talking about before. I'm going to get the name wrong, but Twin Flames? Or
I was going to ask if it was Twin Flames.
Yeah. Okay. As a dating expert, what the fuck, like what the actual fuck, like, because one thing that really stood out to me, I mean, all abuse and gaslighting, and because there's always a very not funny side to these, of course. Yeah. I mean, like the Nexium thing that got darker than I could, even though the guy was pretty comical to just in his demeanor and how, but similar to that. So what I found really shocking, that cult was like all female.
Mm-hmm.
It was over Zoom. Which like, but he still somehow, like the sleep deprivation, which seems to be almost mandatory to program people. He did manage to keep people up for like 96 hours or whatever on these calls somehow. But this guy was also like profoundly uncharismatic. Okay, so can you help me unpack that a little bit with like what's the deal?
I think it's the reason that cult leaders gain their following is because they promise something to people who are so desperate in need of that hope, in need of that validation, in need of whatever goal they have in front of themselves. And I think the Twin Flame stuff is so interesting because you can kind of, you understand why that desperation is there. I mean, it's people want to believe that there is one person for them and that it's this like cosmic pairing. People they believe in soulmates. It's the same kind of thing. But it just repackaged in a more spiritual way. But I think those people are just so desperate to find something, and the cult leader has met them where they are and said, "Oh, you want this thing? I can give it to you. Here it is." And it starts with, it's like a yes ladder of just, listen to this YouTube video, just, watch this thing. It's a free course. And it's like, and then you go up the ladder and you get to a point where you've just lost yourself, and you've joined this community of people who seem wonderful, and they support you, and they do love you for you, and they are all in this together. And it's, something that you may not have validation from friends and family or whatever groups you're in, from work. People don't have those third spaces anymore, where they can make friends and they can feel that support that's outside of like the family or outside of work. So I wonder if like the cult Zoom has become a third space for some people. You know, I think Twin Flames is not the only kind of cult out there that, you know, preys on that need for social interaction, for, validation, for we're all working toward this together. I think that's the draw to it. You know, if you believe in soulmates, if you believe there's one person out there, if you believe you've tried everything, if you've tried the dating apps, if you've tried meeting people, you know, and if you're in the right time and the right time in the right place, like quote unquote, you know, that seems like a great option. There's a quote, a cult, the Love Has Won cult.
That's on the list. We haven't gone there yet. It's good.
It's so good. I wish I could go back and watch it for the first time again. There's a moment where a guy says, you know, I was seeking my whole life and I was just seeking the answers and I got tired of seeking. So I just laid my bags down here. And I think for some cults and for a lot of situations and, you know, relationships, jobs, whatever, there are people that are just so tired of looking for the answer that they're like, here it is. And it, you know, maybe it's that this like drunk woman is God, you know, like, but it's like, if you're so tired and after being so desperate of finding or looking for the answer, and you can just kind of convince yourself with as much confirmation bias and this wonderful community of people confirming, you know, that twin flames are real, or this woman is God, or this person will change the world. Like, you know, it can, I think it's easier than a lot of people think to fall into cults. So
sure. And I guess the other thing too, like, especially with these, because we're in this fascinating moment where we can see a lot of this stuff actually happening on Netflix. And it's almost the social media thing of like, don't compare your first chapter to somebody else's whatever. And like because the part that really I found just basically pretty hard to watch is that we're watching this guy like emotionally abuse his girlfriend in real time on a Zoom with a bunch of women. But I guess from a psychological point of view, they are already so far down that yes ladder and have done so much by the time they're seeing what we're seeing that they've found a way to make that make sense.
Yeah, you can, I mean, you can excuse anything. You can gaslight yourself into thinking that this behavior is okay, and if you have a community on Zoom or wherever that is also saying, yeah, no, this is completely fair behavior, this is okay behavior, this is, you know, just one step toward this goal that we all have. Yeah, you can excuse anything. It happens a lot in dating too, where, you know, people just want to be in that relationship so much, or they want this thing so much, or that, you know, when these red flags are flying, they just excuse them away. And, you know, there's so many things that are subjective that you can explain away that, you know, sometimes you just wear the rose-colored glasses and don't see the red flags. So
amazing. I love that we got to cults. I mean, this is like such a
cults
great,
are my eye-opening thing.
The one part in Twin Flames that I was like actually laughing out loud was because the guy had this very smarmy demeanor where he would kind of lean back and do a lot of active listening, you know, like but there's that young woman and she's like she's basically at his insistence kind of stalking her alleged soulmate, and this guy has at this point like she's done prison time for stalking, and she's like, yeah, I don't know what to do, there's a restraining order, the state of California has said I can't contact this guy. And I just remember the cult leader dude was like, restraining order, you gonna let that stop you? And he like was like scoffing at, and she's like, yeah, but I've been to jail, and I mean, it was sad, but like,
and you can twist that message of like, don't let anything get in your way, or don't let, you know, barriers, you know, just run through the barriers or whatever. You could twist that into saying that restraining order is just a barrier. Obviously, you know, I'm not condoning that behavior, but you can explain all of those things with, I'm just so determined to reach my goal, or I'm, you know, I'm all in, or all of these other messages that you can just apply to, what you should be applying to, like running a marathon or something. You're applying to breaking the law.
Right.
It's the same message. You're just using it in a very different way.
Yeah, and I guess I feel like the internet has enabled a lot of that, where it's like some of these same principles of, because it is interesting how like waking up early and looking like taking care of yourself is sort of having a moment. But you can also apply that in a useless or insidious direction if you want.
Yeah. Because there's so few third spaces, and there's so, the communities that we are in are like our like insular family and work. And for a lot of people, work is remote and you don't interact with anyone, and you have these very tight boundaries. And like, you might not have other people checking in on you in a way that can help pull you out of like a toxic situation. If I'm on Zoom all day and no one else talks to me, whatever I'm seeing on Zoom is going to be what I'm hearing and what I'm believing and what I'm, cementing into my mindset. So, yeah, just I think go outside is what everyone should do.
I was going to say I am about to go outside and go for a walk. Megan, thank you so much for chatting with me. Where can listeners find you and your book?
Yeah, so I have a website, meganokonsky.com, that has, the basic, my Substack, my bio, my portfolio, and my Instagram is where I share a lot of the book news. So that's Instagram.com/meganokonsky, OKONSKY. And yeah, those are the best two places to find me. I don't always post on Substack, but I do share some of my thoughts on dating and writing and this crazy world we're in.
Crazy. Well, thanks again, Megan. And those of you listening at home, stay out of those cults.
That is called be positive on your dating apps.
Yeah. Enough with this wall of requirement listed demands. And yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. This was very fun.
This was so fun. Thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed it. If you have an epic story, I'd love to hear it. You can find me at dailyprose.com or on LinkedIn. My links and Megan's are in the show notes. Thanks for listening.